So, welcome to Top Voices. This is our podcast. It's around the global discussions with global thought leaders in the language industry. And today, we're very lucky to have as our guest Morana Perić. And Morana is the Director of Localization at DeepL. Obviously, DeepL is a very, very high-profile organisation. And I'll let you know who we are. I am Paula McGrath. I'm the owner and CEO of International Achievers Group. And here to my left is the lovely Mr. Bruno Herrmann. Of course, Bruno is one of the best known and one of the best respected individuals in the whole language industry, and extremely well known. And we're very lucky to have you here, Bruno.
Thank you.
So the focus for the discussion, it's going to be, in addition to getting to know a little bit about Morana, we'd also like to talk about progression pathways, which, if you're happy to share information about career opportunities, how things work in your organisation, perhaps your own career path, if you're happy to share any of that. In addition to that, supplier pathways, because obviously it's a very, very different world. The world is changing very quickly for those in the language industry, and there are an awful lot of suppliers who are trying to find the best way to engage effectively with organisations. So any inside information that you're happy to share, or tips based on your own experience, or maybe protocols within your organisation, just to try and help the industry as best we can. So if you're comfortable with that, let's get started.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm glad. We love doing this. Don't we?
Yeah, we do. Absolutely.
I learned so much. I don't come from this industry. I've obviously been working in it for the last number of years, but my Lord, I'm just not long back from the LT Innovate conference in Vienna. My brain has changed shape after that. It was just so interesting because I'm a businesswoman through and through. I have obviously a financial background. I was going to be an accountant in a firm of accountants many years ago, so I have a professional services training. But what I have learned, or I am continuing to learn as I walk through my business life, is that every industry is interconnected. All the industries are interconnected, and what changes that are happening across all industries. Anyhow, so let's start, and maybe you want to start by telling us about yourself and how you ended up in this enviable role. I would suggest. I'd say there's a lot of professionals out there. Definitely. How did you end up in this position?
Yeah, definitely. So I come from Croatia. I'm originally from Croatia. I was born in Zagreb and I grew up there. That's the capital of Croatia, located in the more boring part, not on the coast, so in the inland. I studied languages, like I guess many of the listeners and people in the industry. So I studied English language and literature and Italian language and literature and linguistics. I started my career, like many people, freelancing. So I did a lot of different things, from, literary translations to technical translations to, all kinds of stuff, freelanced for a while. And then my first kind of, serious in-house position was for this media company. They were a big company in the Balkan area, doing subtitling and dubbing and like preparation for basically media content to be released in the local languages. And I spent a few years there. That was a very interesting, I think, way to break into the localization industry, because it's also so specific, right? Like you get a movie, you get your own show, you have this limited space where you need to convey a lot of stuff. You need to convey humor, you need to convey character, you really need to be the voice for these actors in your region. So I really loved working in this industry. It was interesting. So spent a few years freelancing for them and then working in-house for them as a quality insurance manager. I transitioned into tech. That was around, I think, 2012. I got my first role in tech. It was in Booking.com, which is also a big organization. That was a very interesting time for Booking. While I was there, I think it grew from like 2,000 to 20,000 people. I spent 4 years there. And there I actually managed a content team. So I didn't work in localization specifically. I worked with content, English content. And after 4 years in booking, I took this leap and I moved from Croatia, from Zagreb to Berlin, Germany. And I got a role in Get Your Guide, which is another marketplace for tours and activities similar to booking.com, but not for hotels and apartments, but for tours and experiences. And there, I also had a wonderful time. I spent around 4 years there, really building up the localization team kind of from the ground up. So it was also really, kind of a typical scale-up hyper-growth company. We went from around 150 people when I joined to around 600-700 when I was leaving. And I also, during that time, I had my son. So that was in 2020. I went on my maternity leave. I had him in the height of the pandemic, which was somehow convenient, but also not so convenient.
I
know. After that, I kind of felt ready for a change. So I started in Free Now, which is a ride-hailing company, kind of like similar to Uber. I think you know it in UK, Ireland, and Germany. Yeah. It's quite big. And there I actually worked in the UX team. So I managed the UX content team. I had some marketing writers on my team as well, and also localization. I really loved this setup. It was, we can talk about it a little bit later, but it was really amazing to have all these teams that are in charge of content together. So had an amazing time there, really liked it. And then last year around December, kind of DeepL, knocked on the door, and it was DeepL, so I just had to say yes.
You have to say yes. It'd be rude to say no. So all those different organizations, where were they predominantly headquartered? Were they Europe headquartered, US headquartered?
Europe, yeah, all of them.
Okay, all Europe, okay.
Yeah, all of them in Europe. Booking is headquartered in Amsterdam, but it had offices in, I think it was massive, 120, 140, I don't really remember, offices around the world, really massive. So I was based in Croatia while I worked for Booking, but I went to Amsterdam a lot. We went to the headquarters quite often. And then, Get Your Guide, headquartered in Berlin, Free Now headquartered in Hamburg, and now DeepL headquartered in Cologne, actually. Yeah.
So culture-wise, was there a consistent culture across them, different culture as an employee experience?
That's a good question. But I mean, they're definitely all European, which is good. But it also depends. Booking had a big US influence. They were bought by Priceline a long time ago. I think they are all predominantly international, which kind of creates this very international culture. You can definitely sometimes feel some, Germanness in the more kind of, I would say, support functions, like kind of how I don't know, like little things like, how do you process like an invoice when you travel, or how do you deal with like some of these technicalities that are very bureaucratic in Germany. But to be quite frank, like Croatia's very similar. Like we learn a lot from Germany and Croatia. So I wasn't really flabbergasted by the bureaucracy in any way in the transition.
Very detail oriented. So, how did you end up? What drove you to start down this path? I mean, was there a big focus for you from your family background or your support background to?
Interesting.
I'm trying to remember my own actually.
Yeah. My family, my family, they're all in the natural sciences. Like my mom was a biochemist, and my dad was a mechanical engineer, so like completely different actually. And I think for me, it was, I was kind of in between, like, do I go down this like science path, or do I go down this kind of humanities path? And, I guess I just chose the humanities. At that point, probably it was something that attracted me more to it. But now I do enjoy science. I kind of keep it as a hobby now. I think it could have gone both ways. Like I probably could have been a scientist and then had languages as a hobby. But I do enjoy reading. I love, reading about physics and a lot of these things are like of interest to me. So I think, I kind of had a weird, completely opposite two paths that I could have gone down with. I think in another, I guess, quantum universe, I'm a scientist. So
the analytical skills have probably proved very useful. I'm assuming you have strong analytical skills.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I've been told.
So let's talk a little bit more technical. Bruno, do you want to?
Yeah, well, before going too deep in technicalities, I just wanted to circle back on something you asked, Paula, about your interest in languages. And I think for you, well, that's my perspective, so you can disagree with it. But my perspective is that for you, and not just for you, but for people like you, having this background in languages, but still having also some sort of DNA in, scientific matters. It's a great time because what we see now in AI, in generative AI, is a mix of language expertise and, I would say, technical expertise, which is engineering and data science. So just to get your perspective, do you feel like now, like a fish in the water, in this generative AI world, where indeed it's all about languages, because LLMs are based on language, prompts are based on languages as well. But how do you feel now that you can still keep your interest and your passion for languages, but at the same time use your sort of, as I said, technical DNA to be more comfortable, maybe, or be more productive in this, AI-driven world?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely the perfect storm, right? It's the culmination of both worlds. I think it's amazing because, you can argue that everything is language or that everything is mathematics.
Yep.
I remember when I was in college, one of my favorite subjects was cognitive linguistics, and basically it explained how your whole reality is shaped through language, right? And how language influences everything around. But at the same time, it's all also, it's chemistry and physics and all of these things. So I think it is a beautiful kind of moment. It's great for me at the moment because I have a lot of curiosity about these things, right? So I'm a person who's gonna want to understand how this functions. I want to understand how these things work, why they produce this, like what's in the background. So yeah, I think in this way it's a good spot to be, right? And it's a good time to be. It's definitely a very interesting time for everything, for everybody, right? Not just the language industry. I always joke, we've kind of been in this spot since the 50s. Like, when was the first machine translation
Yes.
invented? It was MIT in the 50s, I think.
Yeah.
So 70 years we've had this kind of, connection between statistics and language and all of these things. But now it's everybody, right? It's the engineers, it's the coding, it's advice, it's all of these roles and all of these industries impacted. So yeah.
No, absolutely. And well, I'm not a newbie in this industry, so I've been around for 30 years. And indeed, I remember when I was at university, I was also passionate about linguistic. Computational language, linguistics, sorry. And one thing that I've noticed, and probably you are well positioned to say a word about it, is that now, today, in the language industry, there is this need, even this requirement, to, as a leader in the language industry, to be working not only with language experts, but to be working with data scientists. Because generative AI or even machine translation needs both expertise, right? It needs expertise in language management, which of course is coming from language experts, but you also need expertise and experience from data science people, because these people have data management expertise. I'm sure that in DeepL you are surrounded by both language experts and data scientists. Is it something exciting for you to work with these very different types of people, or do you find some challenges in bringing those two types of expertise together?
Yeah, definitely. No, I mean, it's wonderful. We have a massive, of course, research team and data team and engineering team. I've always enjoyed these teams, and I always wanted to spend a lot of time with them. It's not the first time that there's a lot of technical people. All of my companies had a lot of technical people, and I always worked with them. I think Of course, there's like a special use case now with generative AI and LLMs. But even before this, even if you take a look, I don't know, 5-10 years ago, we worked with people in these profiles because in this digital age that's been going on for 20 years already, you need data for everything. You need data to make even the smallest decisions, and you need data to make decisions for language as well. You test everything. This is something I learned in Booking.com ages ago. In Booking, we tested everything. There was like 50 A/B tests running on the website every day. Everything was tested by data scientists to see if this is the right thing, right? You want to change this button, you want to change the what it says, let's test it, right? And it's just, it was really this culture of let's not be about opinions, but let's be about data, because one person's opinion versus your million clients' opinions that they will showcase by using your product or through some research or through a test. You can't really compete with that. So I've always thought of them as like a integral to the experience. And we always worked with them to make decisions, decisions around what we prioritize, decisions around how we treat different types of content, decisions around, what we do, what is the next market we want to open in and start working in. So yeah, I've always kind of been connected to these teams, and of course it's amazing to have so many of them now and working in so many different kind of layers, let's say.
Yeah, and I think based on what you just said, about your experience and your background, I think another reason for you to be comfortable now in DeepL is also that you mentioned that you worked also in terms of content management. So you were not specifically focused or obsessed by translation. You were freelancing in translation, localization, but you managed also other types of content activities. And you mentioned UX, managing UX, which is also part of what I call the content supply chain, which is that, if you look at content today, and this is something that sometimes buyers are struggling to make suppliers understand about their business, is that translation localization is one part, one phase of the supply chain. It starts with the creation and it ends with the delivery. But you, based on your background today, you've been involved in not just one phase, but in several phases of the supply chain of content operations. So is it also something that, are there lessons that you learned when you were working in other content phases that you apply now to your job as director of localization to make sure that localization is not seen as something out of supply chain, but something embedded in the content supply chain?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm smiling and laughing because absolutely, I know you talk about this a lot, Bruno, as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
But no, absolutely, everything I do is influenced by this. I'm sorry you missed the webinar yesterday because I actually did talk about this exact thing. No, absolutely. This is the crucial, I think. I don't want to call it a mistake, it's just the way that things were set up. But I think it is one of the mistakes that we make in localization. We kind of position ourselves as something separate from this. And this causes, in my opinion and in my experience, the most problems. It has to kind of be together, right? So my best experience is when I had all the teams. So when I was managing the content team, the UX writers, content design, marketing writers, and localization, and we all worked together in the same team. It just kind of functioned perfectly. Everybody knew what was the purpose, what was the impact of this content, who are you doing this for, and then we could transition this in our localization as well. And even now, so in DeepL, we do kind of sit alone. We are part of the marketing department, but we are not together officially with any of the content teams. But you can still make this effort, I think, because I have this experience. When I came in, I did this initial outreach. I reached out to all the leaders of these teams. We organized a get-together. We organized a workshop. We brought the teams together to really understand what is happening on this side, what is happening on this side. How can we make this relationship more fruitful and better? And yeah, it changed so much for everybody, right? It's actually... sometimes it surprises me how little people know about what's going on outside of their core process, right? Like you do this thing and it's so important to know about these things around, but people are busy, people get kind of bogged down into their day to day and they forget to think about this. And I think it's crucial. This is something that I'm really interested in as well, and I try to learn a lot about now, which is kind of like systems thinking and systems theory. And this basically says, everything is a system and everything is connected. So what you do impacts this team in this context. What they do impacts you. And in order to have a successful, company product collaboration, all of the things in the system might, need to work together. So yeah, that's definitely.
Thank you.
Who were the people that attended your session yesterday? Predominantly, were they from supplier side or?
I think it was a lot of localization people, definitely. It was a lot of, this is kind of we are doing like this webinar series where we want to basically showcase how it's called DeepL on DeepL, and we want to showcase how teams within DeepL work with DeepL, so how we use our own product in our day-to-day, in our work, and how we work, just kind of, opening up the doors a little bit, being more transparent on how we operate. So I think there were also some kind of clients, maybe companies that we work with that want to learn more. Maybe there's a company that is our client. They have a small localization team and they want to understand how we work, learn from us. There was some, I think, individual, kind of people, freelancers who are working in their own space. And yeah, I think we had a really good turnout. It was around 200 people at the end. So
Wow. Holy moly.
That's really good.
That's a great achievement. So how long will this series be running for?
I mean, we'll see how long.
Okay. So you don't, okay.
Yeah, we will include other teams. We already are planning a next session where we're gonna invite one of the teams that we worked closely with in this process transition, and we're gonna just do kind of like a use case, like look at how we transitioned all of this content to this work stream. So yeah, we'll see. We asked also, of course, we asked people what would they like to hear. So we're trying to, yeah.
How many people are in your team? Your team?
At the moment, we are 21.
Okay. Okay. And is it all remote, or are people based in an office, or how does it work?
So we have a few big offices in Germany and the UK. So we have an office in Cologne and Berlin. And people tend to be based around offices, but we also do have remote people working, from a smaller city in Germany. But yeah, we have kind of remote hybrid situation going on. Yeah.
I'm interested in so I know I'm jumping around a little bit here, but you're commenting, and this is one of Bruno's favorite songs, is, the whole supply chain analogy, not analogy, the whole supply chain operational style. Because the interesting thing is that if any of us who are working within any organization, if you're part of the chain, it's actually easier to be not valid. What's the word?
Valuable,
or to be seen as valuable. And that's not the correct. I can't think of the exact word, but it's valid. It's anyhow.
Elevated. I mean, what I typically say when there is this sort of supply chain analogy is that, the flip side of keeping localization out of the supply chain is that, of course, it's not going to be seen as a value creating element. It's going to be seen as a cost center. It's going to be seen as even as a cost driver, which is even worse than a cost center, instead of being a profit driver. Because at the end of the day, and Paula, you're absolutely right, I insist a lot on this now as a consultant, because in my previous jobs as an employee, I always wanted me and my team to be part of a supply chain that is called product supply chain, content supply chain, because this was the only real way, specifically in multinationals where I was, to generate value and to be recognized, to be elevated, to be integrated, and to be celebrated as creators of value. And I think that's what you had in mind, right?
And not to be seen to be the first team that can be easily switched off and be switched out by Google Translate. I mean, I suppose, would you have any words of wisdom for people that are working within any of the organizations, multinationals, in how to persuade the decision makers to change or not to change, but to integrate the the localization as part of the supply chain, as opposed to seeing them as sitting out there in a bit of a luxury. So when times get tough, it's tutty bye. I don't know. Do you have any? I know this is this boils down from individual to individual, and I myself, pardon me, sorry. I'm getting over a cold. I've actually, spoken with individuals about putting the business case together. So maybe I'm answering my own question. But do you have anything to throw into the mix?
Yeah, I mean, it could be a business case. It could be, what I really found is a few things, I guess. Number one is I think what we always have to do, I've seen people in localization do this, or not just in localization. This is something that we talk a lot about. But, I worked in a design team, and they suffer from some of the same things. Like you would really be surprised. And when you enter every one of these teams, you realize we all have these same not imaginary, they're real problems.
No. We think we're the only ones. Yeah.
Exactly. We think we're the only ones, but they think of the same things. They also think nobody cares about design. Design needs a seat at the table. We are just a luxury, a cost center. So it's very interesting to, first of all, to understand this. You are not alone in this. Everybody is in the same situation. And then another thing that I do try to do is people tend to always go knocking on doors, right? They knock on other people's doors and they're like, let me in, I need to be here inside, but they never open their doors, right? And it goes both ways, like open your doors and invite people in, let them take a look at what you are doing and let them understand like this. And then they will also invite you, into their little house. So this really works well, just showcasing a little bit, being more transparent. Of course, this is just the beginning. I also do always recommend, and I mean, this works wonders if you can do it. We mentioned, data teams, we mentioned data. Just get them on board, get them, to do 1 quarter project with you where you say, look, we need to prove the value of this. Let's pick a market. Let's do this. Let's do all the marketing there, I don't know, in English for 50% of the people. And let's localize all the marketing and let's see, the conversion rates. Or let's localize the website for this market all of a sudden, and let's see how much the revenue increases. And, we've done this a few times in some of my companies, and sometimes it doesn't work. It also gives you a learning. Sometimes you have amazing results. We had I think when we localized the website and a lot of the marketing for the Japanese market in one of my previous companies, we had a 500% increase in revenue within, a few months, I think. So, sometimes we can't do everything by ourselves. We also tend to want to prove this by ourselves. But if you actually ask for help, people will love to do this. You get a data analyst and you say, look, this is my hypothesis. My hypothesis is that if we do this, we will get this. And, you will find somebody who's going to want to work with you on this. And this is a very good way to do it.
Makes an awful lot of sense. Sometimes it does boil down to personality. So not everybody that would be their comfort zone. But yeah. I suppose I'm just, and we're fortunate enough that we get to speak to a lot of people. Well, everybody that we speak with is actually in the language industry. But I would suggest, based on the people that I've spoken to, that you have one of the top jobs that's out there in your in your space. Yeah. So if you were sort of, for people that might be watching this or listening to this, do you want to maybe share with us some of the challenges and sort of maybe paint a more realistic picture rather than, oh my Lord, I'd love that job?
Yeah, it's me. I love that job. Yeah. No, I'm kidding.
There's realities to everything. There's no such thing as the perfect setup anywhere. So I suppose it's just maybe if you're comfortable to share some of the challenges that go with what is probably going to be perceived as one of the top jobs in the sector.
Thank you. Yeah, definitely. I mean, thank you for saying this. I really don't see it like that.
It's important to share.
You're making me blush. So I think really.
Well, I'm guessing it's well earned, well deserved. I would guess so. But it's more about maybe talking through the realities of your job. If you're comfortable to share.
Absolutely. I mean, there's it's also a job like, I guess, like any other, right? Like there's always things that you enjoy. There's always things that, are a challenge. I think at the moment, we're in a very interesting space. I think our team, we are this team of we're a localization team within a company that basically sells translation localization. So we are a customer. We use our product We know what our product does. So we're a customer within this company. And I think, before I joined, this wasn't really evident enough. And I really worked hard to build a lot of relationships around the company and to talk to all the people. And we're getting a lot of great collaborations and a lot of great interest now. Like we get to work with all of these teams to improve the product, improve this, like work in this kind of, let's say, almost like a meta function where we can be also advisors to a lot of the teams on many things. And I think that's wonderful. But also for me personally, I feel like I don't have enough hours in the day. Like I feel a little bit, I would love to help everybody, but it's kind of like I need to pick and choose sometimes. So I do feel sometimes like I have to say no, or I have to put something on hold. Sometimes I feel like, I could spend more time being a good manager to my team. Like, when you're very exposed to the company, you have a little bit less time to spend with your direct reports. We do meet every week. Like we have a good balance, but sometimes like getting your hands a little bit more dirty and like working in some of the day-to-day things. I do miss a little bit of those. But
now that you've shone the spotlight, you have to keep that light burning.
yeah, it's an interesting time, definitely. Like we're doing a lot of interesting things at the moment. But yeah, if I had 5 more hours in a day, that would be great. At the moment, it's not always like this. Like there's eras in your life and like kind of seasons in your life when you have different problems. Like I had problems where I couldn't get this right. Like this was my biggest problem. Like we couldn't get the resources we needed. We couldn't get the attention we needed. And it's all kind of different. I think the key thing is to try to understand what it is and kind of embrace it and not feel guilty about what you're missing out of because you're focusing on this. I think for me at least, because I do struggle with this. Like I can be, I can feel guilty for not doing this, or I should have done more of this, or I should have done this sooner, right? This was maybe important, but I chose to do this. But these are the trade-offs. You always kind of need to do them, right? So, and they're different in different stages of your life. So
it's interesting because I'm an employer now, obviously much smaller companies than anything like the likes of DeepL or even the organizations you've worked with in the past. And ideal team members are people that are that passionate and that worry about it like that. But then you don't want them to worry so much that they're overwhelmed.
Yeah.
It's a difficult balance to get, for employers and employees, I would suggest, particularly the ones that are ambitious and capable.
Yeah. There's never enough time to do everything. I think because I also worked in UX and product, I learned some really good lessons there. I think one of I'm not sure exactly who it was. I might misquote them, but it was either a product director in Google or one of the product, gurus. They said to a product manager, write down all of your ideas that you have for the product, write them on a piece of paper, write, however much you can think of. And they wrote like 20 ideas. And then they were like, and now cross 19 of them because they're going to, distract you from doing this number one. That's very important. And, it sounds a little bit extreme, but sometimes you need to do this, right? Like you need to focus on one thing.
That's actually a very simple way. It's a very good idea. That I'm just thinking about myself, my butterfly brain, and but sometimes even just getting it out on paper means it's gone out of your brain.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm never going to have the resources to do some of them, but they're still running around in my brain.
Yeah.
So,
exactly.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned, Morana, the challenge of defining and managing priorities. You said that you would love to have more hours in a day. I'm with you on that one, so I totally share your objective. And I think I've been following DeepL for a while now. And it seems to me that one of the main priorities of DeepL has always been to keep the balance between human and technology right. Because I remember before AI was hype, I was already using a product from DeepL, which is still existing, of course, lingui.com. And I was using the website to find out about the context of some translation or some sentences. So that's how I got connected to DeepL, as a product manager. And but of course, when AI became more obvious and more more hype, more developed, I said to myself that I noticed that unlike other players in this field called generative AI, DeepL was keeping this balance right between human and technology by spending or giving priority to human supervision in the creation of data, and language models. And that's what I mentioned several times in my post. That's why, personally, I like DeepL a lot, because they want to, of course, they want to be a big player in the tech space for AI, but they keep this balance, human tech balance, right, by saying, yes, we are a very data-driven company because we need language data to train our models, and we need, of course, engineers, we need data scientists to build those models, but we keep human supervision to make sure that the output and the language, the value of language throughout the AI journey is still there. Am I right by saying that, or am I wrong?
No, you're exactly right.
Oh, okay. Oh,
Also, really amazing that you know of Lingui. That's I was asked by somebody recently. People don't know about this connection, right? But I was asked. I did a little lecture at a university in France, and they were asking, "Oh, how are Lingui and DeepL connected?" Because we use Lingui as a dictionary, and we see DeepL. But yeah, that's also fascinating. Really good research. But no, you're exactly right, and I think this is if you listen to some of our leaders speak, they will always mention this, and they will always mention this as an advantage, right? And as the reason why we have such good quality, because we have a team of linguists, and we have a lot of external collaborators and linguists who work with the models, who work with our data. That it's a very different approach than, I don't know, for example, OpenAI, that kind of, they try to get, there's a difference between the volume of data that you get and the quality of data that you get. And
Absolutely.
we were always focused on the quality of data as well. So yeah, it's exactly like you said. So
no, this is a great point, because actually you're right. For the moment, the way I see the industry, or at least the approaches with the use of generative AI, is that some companies, some organizations are making bets on the volume, some organizations are making bets on the quality, or the effectiveness, as I call it. But I think that, I work a lot in regulated industries, specifically life science. And I can tell you that, of course, in life science, there is a strong focus on quality and effectiveness, because more than in non-regulated industries, any mistake, any weakness, any gap in language effectiveness or in language model effectiveness is not just a matter of it's not as good as we expected, but it's going to be lack of compliance, penalties. It's about money at the end of the day. So there is a lot of pressure in regulated industries for that, and that's why since I've been working in this industry now for a number of years, DeepL has always come as a reference, because regulated industries, more than any other industries, know the value and the importance of human supervision, because it's a matter of money for them, it's a matter of compliance, and it's much more painful if you miss that than in non-regulated industries where, it's a travel website, but, if there are mistakes in the translation or in the creation of content, people will say, oh, it's a poor piece of content, but there will be no compliance penalty or whatever. So I think that's probably one of the real differentiator for DeepL, is really to keep that human supervision and the focus on quality, to make sure that indeed at the end of the day, for regulated and non-regulated industries, there is this value that is coming out of generative AI, because otherwise people consider generative AI as just sort of hype that is not as good or as impressive as it should be. And I think that if your clients realize that, DeepL, with their language models, with the language data, they can really create value, then they will have a different opinion of generative AI.
Yeah, exactly,
So-
exactly, and it's also about security as well, and what and how we treat your data, right? Because this is
Yep.
also very clear, and we make it evident everywhere on our website and our contracts. Like if you use our enterprise, our pro versions, we do not train our models on your data, and this is also so important for many companies, right? This is something that we offer that I don't think any other company like us offers. So.
Okay. It ended up being quite a heated discussion at the LT Innovate event in Vienna last week. There were a number of specialists on a panel. Now, Bruno can speak in more detail about the technicalities of this, but what I took away from it as a sort of a business person, the discussion around using people's information, for these different models, and then again for the AI, the generative AI stuff. Even though there's the EU Act.
Yeah.
The EU Act that has been introduced, was that last year?
I think it was approved this year.
Okay.
But it was introduced last year.
Yeah. There was these specialists sitting on the panel, and there was it's a bit of a wait and see, but there was a big concern from people in the audience who are running businesses about the data that they're using. So maybe Bruno can expand a little more technically on that.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, in this conference, there were different people presenting on their products or their services. Startups or non-startups, scale-ups, and multinationals. And indeed, there were several focus points, and one of the focus points was data.
Yeah.
And I think also a little bit in my own presentation, but I could see it probably in most presentations. Speakers were talking about the importance of using generative AI safely, responsibly, as we say, responsible AI. But of course, it starts not just at the output phase, it starts in what I call personally upstream AI, which is data. Whatever the output is, it will never be better than the data that has been used to train the models. So it's always good to look at the output quality and how it's produced, the production mode, if you will. But if you don't look at what's upstream, which is data, because you start with data that you create yourself or that you purchase from one of the many data providers today, it is indeed an ethical, a technical, and I would say
there's a legal possibility.
Yeah, a legal challenge, just because indeed there is security, which is again for regulated industries, it's extremely important. But also beyond security, there is this focus, which is in many organizations, which is not strong enough yet, on the data that is selected to be used as training data. Just because there is such a rush to AI, then many organizations acquire or they create data from their existing files, and they want to say, okay, volume, we need more data, instead of saying, okay, we need more data, but what kind of data do we need?
But also, who owns the data?
Who owns the data?
Because
so for that, DeepL is in the middle of the playing field, I guess.
There was also an interesting. Sorry, honestly, you'll get a chance to talk in a second. We're just going to chat here. Sorry, joining the chat. There was also an interesting crossover between not plagiarism, it's anti-plagiarism. What do they call that act? Again, it's so people are reproducing some of the data, and there's the question then around. But that legislation is covered by. I'm having a complete word freeze here.
GDPR?
No, yeah, well, it's actually. It's the legal arm that comes at you is under GDPR legislation, but there's another act that's been in play for 20, 30 years, which is the one that all the actors and playwrights in Hollywood are using at the moment to take the cases.
Oh, yeah.
What act is that? Oh, my Lord, it's a very common word.
Yeah.
But it's anti-plagiarism.
Yeah, I remember it came up.
So there was an interesting discussion then around, the data that's been used. Around, obviously there's the ownership, but then the reproducing of it. There's people sitting in the audience quite nervous thinking, uh-oh. But the thing that interested me, what interested me was, these lawyers sitting up on the panel. There is no answer. I mean, the lady that I think that was able to contribute with most clarity only because ethics apply regardless of time. but the other folks weren't able to be clear because enough time hasn't passed and enough case hasn't been taken. And anyhow, I just thought it was interesting. Sorry, now you better.
Yeah. Definitely. I mean, you've seen all now there's, legal cases against OpenAI and similar companies from, I think, New York Times or New Yorker.
That's right.
All of these big companies that, kind of got their data stolen, really.
Yeah.
Basically. So yeah, of course, there's a lot of this going around. I mean, yes, here we are definitely, we a German company coming from such a regulated, country. We definitely have, I think, the most ethically sourced data and ethically treated data out there. So yeah. But to your previous point, Bruno, it reminded me when I was just doing some research, it was like kind of probably around the time this AI hype got started, which was 2021, 22. I was kind of doing some research around machine learning, and one of the things they like to say, which I think is kind of funny, how machine learning really works is like you have garbage in and garbage out, right? So this is what they say, not just for LLMs, for any kind of machine learning. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, well, and actually, to your point, when you use the word machine learning, you have the word learning. And essentially, you can even compare machine with human learning, because if you teach a child to do this right, it will do it right. If you teach a child to do something wrong, it will do it wrong. So it's always the word teaching is actually very interesting in the process, because machine learning and generative AI is a good model of that. It is actually, getting lessons from data. And if these lessons are good, probably, the rest of the process will be under control. If it's not good, it will be out of control, or it will be very bad, just because, it can only replicate what has been taught originally. So if a model is taught to, generate content that is bad, it will do it bad. And it's the same, it's another debate, I know, but the discussion around, can AI or should AI be able to think, to reason, well, the reasoning piece of machine learning today, it's actually replicated from the reasoning piece from humans. So the reasoning of AI is just mimicking the reasoning of humans, because the machine has learned how to reason from humans. So if a human being is reasoning wrong, then of course the machine will reason wrong. So I think there is this sort of, you're right, there is this sort of logic that is sometimes a bit lost in some processes. But I think that, just to circle back on something that Paula just said, I'm just curious to hear your standpoint or your opinion about one of the key requirements of the EU AI Act, which is transparency. I think that transparency is now a very important, and it's connected to security, of course. But how do you, if you can, if it's not confidential, of course, but how does DeepL stand up or stand out regarding transparency with their clients? Is it something that is really a priority, or is it something still, in progress, work in progress?
Yeah, I think we've always been very upfront with how we use, as I mentioned, like how we use the data, which data, all of these things. But I think this also, of course, I guess was on our radar because it's a current thing. But I'm not exactly sure. I would kind of leave it to our legislation team to put out like exactly all the things that we're gonna do according to it and how and why. But I think we definitely start from a very good position as well.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it also due to, as I mentioned, being a European company. I think people often think of this as a disadvantage, right? When you talk about startups, when you talk about just any tech company, you always think of Silicon Valley, you always think of the US, because this is where, there's like no limitations, the sky's the limit, the legislation very, pliable, very poor. But this is actually one of the situations where it's amazing to be a European company. So, yeah.
It's normally a grumble that the money sits in Silicon Valley, but that obviously hasn't been a challenge with you guys. So the VC, the money. So it's wonderful to get such support. Tell us about DeepL. How many people work there? What's the overall culture? What's it like to work there?
It's amazing. It's a really it's a really fantastic company. I'm really happy to be a part of it.
If you were just to use maybe 2 words, what comes to your mind first just about the culture? Every organization has its own culture.
I think it's hard to find like one word, but it's definitely a very open culture. It's a very open, transparent, very friendly. There's a very kind of small, how would I say this, distance, from the leadership team. The hierarchy is very flat. We are now around 1,000 people.
Okay.
A lot of the people were hired in the past few years, so I think we managed to keep, including me. I mean, I joined a year ago, but I think we managed to really keep this kind of small company mentality, which is wonderful to see, right? So, you can talk regularly to all of the C-level leadership. They speak to the whole team regularly. Updates from the CEO. It's a fantastically open culture and an open company. That's probably the thing I would point out most. Yeah,
that's great. You mentioned a little earlier that you 5 extra hours every day would make life a little easier for you, but. If when it comes to you sort of overseeing and supervising your teams, how does DeepL facilitate personal development, academic development, which I suspect is probably hugely important in your organisation, professional development? What is the overall culture around that?
This is something that we also we're just working on. So we have a lot of new great developments. But overall, I think, there's some kind of, let's say, technical things that you can do in this regard that always help people. So we have the classical learning budget, like you get an amount of money, you can invest in whatever course you want, you can go to a conference, you can take a course, you can hire a coach, you can do whatever you want with the budget. But I think that's just part of the equation, right? If you want people to grow, yes, you can give them courses. I think what's more important is you give them opportunities, right? You expose them to the situations. You learn most by kind of just being put out there or being put in a situation and then learning. And I think because we're not such a big company, because we're still in this kind of a small company stage, there's so many opportunities to do this. There's new things popping up all over the place all the time. We had a situation in the team recently where, for example, we needed some support in the operations team. So I have a small operations team of 2 project managers and an operations manager, and they were a little bit blocked with something. They needed help. So one of the linguists stepped up and they were helping out with this. So now, they get to learn about this side of the business, or sometimes they can help out another team and experience, what are, I don't know, the marketing managers doing in this. So there's a lot of opportunities to kind of grab like this. And if you get support from your leadership and management, that's definitely something that I think that's the best way. But as the company always grows, and I've seen this happen in a few companies, we're also getting more formal things to support this. So, you'll have different leadership paths if you want to go into leadership, different paths that you can take in terms of training internally. If you want to specialize, do you want to be a very senior individual contributor, or do you want to step into leadership? So yeah, all of this will also be, let's say, officially supported in some way. So yeah, I think we're doing a lot there as well.
What a great time to be at that organisation.
Yeah.
Oh my Lord, there was a thought that came into my head and it's gone out of my head again. Sorry, yes, you're now obviously with DeepL for a year, just over a year. And what would you suggest that the market doesn't know about DeepL, or what assumptions would you think are being made that might be not correct, or what what do you think is not out there that you think should be out there?
That's a good question.
If there's nothing, it's fine. The thing as well is all this can be edited, so don't.
No. No,
It's
I'm just trying to think of, kind of what would be the most important. I think one of the things I know, any company as it grows, I think with DeepL specifically, you probably noticed this as well, right? It was a very product-led growth company. Most of the marketing for DeepL was done by word of mouth, and the same for how I got to know DeepL. It was just, there was a linguist on the team, and he was like, "Oh wow, this is like a really good machine translation," right? I didn't see any marketing. There wasn't really a lot of marketing. So in many ways, as any company, when we grow, you kind of have to do more marketing now. You have to do, you're kind of professionalizing as a complete company, and then also that's the moment where people start interpreting things differently, right? So I've seen. I've seen people all of a sudden now react negatively to some things that, we might have a marketing campaign and we say, all right, now, retail companies can use DeepL to do this and this. And then you will have people who will say, oh, it's not, why would you use DeepL? You should do this, or you should use human translators. You're trying to replace humans. You're trying to do this. So I feel like there's a lot of people reading their fears into a lot of the things that we are saying. Like, we never actually say this, or do we mean this? But yeah, I mean, we've always been friends of the industry, and we've always embraced this collaboration, between the linguists, the translators, and the machine translations. So I hope this, if I had a desire, it would be that people, just interpret the messages in the way that we intend them. But that's a very big desire, right? You can't really.
I know. You can't control.
Can't really, yeah.
You can't control. And I think, even with the best training in the world, you can't actually, unless you're going to do 50 different types of messaging and have it so sophisticated that each message is going to each specific market, which is an exceptionally expensive thing to do. And I'm not suggesting you guys couldn't afford it, but most people don't engage in that. You just can't control it. It was interesting. I was fortunate enough to sit in on a discussion a few months back that was run by Gala, ironically, around, with HR professionals, where talking about culture and pretty much from the employees' engagement perspective. So, and one participant said that they realised, but they didn't realise until there was a number of incidents where people were not staying after they were hired for very long, because in fact they were selling the Disney story. It wasn't Disney, by the way. This was not Disney that was doing this, but they were selling the Disney story. Because it turns out it wasn't Disney. It was a normal bog standard company that was growing, that had normal bog standard problems with growing companies. But they realised, so that meant that once the people got in there, they were sort of going, this looks nothing like I was told. This feels nothing like I was told. This experience is nothing like I was told. So hopefully, when you did your interview, was the interview process difficult?
For DeepL?
Yes. No, I think you suggested that you were you might have been headhunted, but
yeah, I was.
Was it a complicated process?
No, it was a very pleasant process.
That's great to hear.
Yeah, it was very. I mean, it was extensive. I did talk to a lot of people. Ironically, I asked for more interviews.
It's good to know.
But it's because I believe it depends. Like, I think I don't want to come across as like I was in a very privileged position, right? I had a good job that I liked, and I was approached. But I do believe like it's a interviewing with a company is a little bit like being on a date. Like I have to like you, and you have to like me.
100%.
So I can like this idea of a company, but until you speak to enough people that tells you, okay, these are actually the people that I'm gonna work with and spend my time. And I do feel like we can. Sorry. my cat is running around. And until, you know, I feel comfortable that we can, you know, I'm going to enjoy working there, because at the end, it's all about the people, right? Like you can be the best brand in the world, like you said. But if the people you actually work with day to day, they're not, you know, they're making your life difficult, then you shouldn't be there. So this was, you know, this is very important for me. And I did this already in a few companies. But again, yes, I also acknowledge this is, you know, maybe not everybody can afford this. If you're looking for a job, you don't have a job right now. Maybe you're not going to insist, you know, give me 3 more rounds. I want to get to know everybody. But yeah,
I know, but that actually, that swings both ways. The in relation to there's a number of things, obviously, that's, I won't even go into all that, but because obviously over the years, I've worked with many different organisations, and it's very tempting sometimes not to present the warts. So even to a recruiter, it's tempting sometimes not to present the warts. And no matter how many times you say, just tell us the story, because there is a fit. There will be a fit.
Exactly.
There will be a fit. So, but also the things that fascinates me, and it's more about looking at, you know, human nature. The number of organisations that take great pride, or they think it's a badge of honour, to torture interviewees as they go through the process. They're only short of ask them to do 10 press-ups in 10 seconds. I mean, it's just some of the stuff we see is entertaining. But
I think it's almost like a consequence of, you know, people probably try to do the right thing, but then they don't focus on, focus more on the process and like adding layers to the interview by thinking it's gonna somehow end up, you know, with them making an objective decision or the right decision. And in reality, you just want to see if, you know, if it will work somehow. Like it's definitely very interesting. But I think you do have to. I always try to be really honest. Like I've had people who, you know, I was approached by a few companies where I wanted to work, and they, after the first time they spoke to me, they never got back to me. It just, you know, but it wasn't, you know, it just wasn't meant to be. I probably wouldn't enjoy it there. And I always say this to people as well. Like I did sometimes coaching to people who, you know, because I hired so much in certain periods of my career, you know, we were building teams of like 20 people. So you have to interview probably, I don't know, maybe 500 people, you know, it's a lot. And one of the things I noticed is if people come into it and they want to show this shiny facade, it's not going to come across. You're going to not come across as who you are, and people are going to know on the other side. And I will always remember, this is one of my favorite stories. That was back when I was in booking. I had a girl come for an interview. She was super sweet, kind of, I think, fresh out of college, you know, very kind of, geeky type, let's say. And we were interviewing her, and she said, yeah, the only thing that I would never want was to work for a corporation. And we started laughing because, you know, we were a corporation. So we were like, oh, yeah, that's funny. I mean, here you are interviewing for a corporation. And she was like, oh my God, you know, I messed up now. I definitely am not going to get the job. And, you know, she got the job. We really liked her. She was amazing in the role. She was in the team for a long time. But, you know, this is just to showcase that even if you know, blurt out something that you think is wrong, if it makes you come across as authentic, it's probably going to get you the job rather than not get you the job. So
just be human. Just be a human being. Try to be your best to be a human being. I remember an awful long time ago, I was born and reared in Ireland, and I'm in my very, very early 60s now. But so during my lifetime, Ireland was quite poor. And now it's not poor at all. I mean, I know there's obviously people that are struggling. Truthfully, there's always people struggling. But, and I can remember with the first recruitment agency I owned. So I was working in firms of accountants, and I was going to be a partner. And I decided, oh God, no, I don't want to do that. Climb into my old age. Thank you very much. So I stepped into recruitment with somebody else. But we had this agency, and in those early days, I was recruiting myself because we didn't have the money to pay for all these recruiters. So myself and my business partner were doing everything. And we were recruiting for, I think it was some sort of junior or trainee accountant somewhere. And this young man came in as a candidate. I went down to the interview room, and he looked like somebody from a boy band. He was beautiful. I mean, he was just beautiful, tall, in the dark hair. And he had a beautiful suit on and a white shirt and a tie. But he had the tie, you know, so he had the collar open. He looked like he was going off to interview for some band, and the collar of the shirt open. But that's all just, you know, fashion choice, whatever none of that stuff really matters usually to me. I know it matters to some, but I don't care about that stuff. But he was sliding down in the chair. And like he was like completely laid back, sliding down the chair. Anyhow, he didn't last too long. Now, to be fair to him, I mean, what I remember saying to him, I was sort of 10 seconds in thinking, oh my goodness. Do you know something? He was just youthful idiocy more than anything else. So I just sort of said to him, okay, I'm going to stop right now. So who had to work a second job in your family to pay for you to go to university? Somebody had, because that's the way it was in Ireland in those days. Now it's a different life. But and he said, oh, my mum had a second job. And I said, so if your mum was sitting watching this, do you think she'd be delighted with all those hours she took that second job? He came out of Trinity with a great high level degree. You know, he was obviously had the academic ability and the intellect to get through the exams. But anyhow, I said, look, I need to go to the bathroom. But if you're here, you know, when I come back, fine. If you decide this is not for you, it's not for you. I came back and you were sitting upright and you had the tie all done up. But I think sometimes people get told, show them that you don't care and care more. Or sometimes organisations think if I hold it so far out here, they're going to want it more. So I'm going to get them to do ridiculous things at a process. Anyhow, that's me just rabbiting on. Sorry, that's a...
Yeah. No, but it makes sense. And like, it's not about not caring, right? That's not the... No, it's just there's a big difference between being your natural self and trying to project that you're indifferent.
Sorry.
No, that's... No, it's
Bruno a bit.
I can really relate to some of the things you said because I've been a hiring manager myself, just like you, Morana. And of course, it's you're right. There is always this sort of objective to get the real person, the real human who is in front of you. But of course, everybody has to play a role. There is a hiring manager, there is a candidate, there are other people, HR coming into play, etc. So I think it's an interesting experience when you have to hire people, that you are in a sort of game at the same time, as you said, in sort of dates. You have to like me, but I have to like you as well. But I'm just wondering from your perspective, because there is this sort of, the language industry is kind of interesting from that perspective, that it's an industry that says, like every other industry, we are looking for talent. Talent is what we want. But on the other hand, the language industry is focused on some what they call hubs. Dublin, Berlin, Spain a lot now, Barcelona. And if you are in Helsinki, if you are in Copenhagen, or if you are in Vienna, you are not on the map for the language industry just because you are living in those cities. So how do you deal with this? And I was a hiring manager not so long ago, and I had to hire people in certain locations as well. I couldn't hire wherever I wanted, although I was looking for the best talent. But it wasn't actually the best talent. It was the best talent in 4 or 5 locations. So how do you deal with that? Because you are lucky to be based in Berlin, which is great, because that's, of course, a city where many people are headhunted, because Berlin is very vibrant and dynamic. But of course, if you were in Copenhagen, probably it would be more difficult for you. So how do you deal with that, knowing that you have to get the best talent on the one hand, but you have to be focused on some locations on the other hand, mostly for cost reasons? How do you balance that? Because it's difficult.
It is difficult, and it's not even that you wouldn't want to have an employee there. It's sometimes like legally you cannot give them a contract, right? Because they need to be sitting in this country because you have a legal entity there to hire them. Mm-hmm. I mean, how we dealt with it before, even before, let's say, the pandemic, before the rise of the work from home and remote work, is either we would offer relocation, but not everybody wants to relocate, right? So we would open up a lot of the roles we opened up, and we would just move people. We would pay for, if they wanted to relocate from there. I hired people from Norway, from Denmark. They moved to Berlin. They were willing to move to Berlin. That's one thing, right? Mm-hmm. They were also young people without families at the time, or people who wanted to relocate their families. But I mean, I guess a different way, which is not everybody wants to do it. But I've also seen some friends and acquaintances, they opt to be like a freelance, freelance collaborator. So you can get a contract like for a year, but you are basically a freelancer. You're working from there. You're a consultant, and you come and visit when you have to. I know it's not the best situation for everybody, but I do know a few very senior people who work like this. Actually, not even in our industry, but in sales or in different industries. But yeah, I guess you kind of have to find a way around it. I think it's easier today, definitely. There's a lot more companies now that are willing to, if nothing else, at least give a remote contract for within the country where you're living, so you don't have to be in Berlin. You can be in Munich or
Yeah,
or
exactly. No, that's what I meant. Because today in many industries, we are in the digital age today. And of course, working digitally means that you can work remotely. You can work as a nomad, of course. Some people like to travel from one place to the other. And of course, when I was a hiring manager, sometimes I was a bit frustrated because I knew that there was a better talent in one location where I could not recruit because of the company guidelines. And I said to myself, it's a shame because I would love to hire that person who I cannot hire for, I would say, company policies, but I had to hire another talent which I knew was less or less adapted to my own team structure, and I had to go for that talent, and it's frustrating. Frustrating. It's a big word, but it's a shame. You feel that you are not attracting the best talent that you need and that you want, and it's. I think it's interesting because I'm working with other industries, the advertising industries, for instance. They don't really care. Sometimes they recruit people in Cyprus or in remote locations because they say this is the best talent. We go for the best talent, and we don't really care if because there are several companies like Deal.com now that can be virtual employer in any part of the world. So it's very easy to use, even if you don't have any legal entity. You can work with these companies that are acting as virtual employers, and they have offices in all over the world, even in the smallest countries like Monaco or in Luxembourg, etc. So it's a bit frustrating, but it's language industry is specific to some extent. So that is what is really what matters. But I had a question for the future, Morana. The future is looking bright for you because you are in one of the best, one of the most active, dynamic players in the language industry today. How do you see your own future if you had to make a bet and if you had to tell us, this is where I would love or I would like to be in 1 or 2 years? What would be your bet? Of course, you're going to tell me it's difficult to say because you never know what can happen. But what would be your ideal or your dream path to the next years or to the years to come?
That is an interesting and a good question. I did think about this a little bit. I think there's a lot of opportunities for our team. A lot of things we can do in DeepL. So I'm really happy with where we are and the situation that we are in. I personally, I do really like. I'm not saying this is something that is going to happen in DeepL or that could happen at DeepL or that I want it to happen in DeepL. But in terms of my career, I would kind of like to also get back into having the content teams, to having the UX team again and working in this space. I think it makes the whole kind of ecosystem better. This is not just in many situations, it's not just something that I can kind of wish and it happens. It's a lot of complications around how organizations are structured. But I do kind of, going back to your old question, I think this is a beautiful way to work. So I would like to kind of, be part of this team again and kind of have this this setup again. And then in general, something that I really enjoy at this stage of my career is really, I realized I really enjoy facilitation. I love bringing kind of people together and making them work better together through, whatever method. Like, do we do a workshop? Are we doing, a session? Am I moderating a retro? Are we doing something like this? Like, this really brings me joy. So doing these things, it's something that I would like to continue doing. I really enjoy them a lot. So yeah, I've also kind of been, researching this a little bit. I bought some toolkits that I could use for this. I really like this part of the job, let's say. It kind of is part of my job now, right? Like we get the team together, you get them to do something together, but I realize it really does bring me joy to do this. So that's something that I'm looking forward to doing.
Can I just expand on that question, if that's okay? It's just for your team, for your department, as part of the whole organization. So what would you say you're the main area of focus for the next 6 to 12 months? So in 12 months' time, what would you like to be able to say, if hopefully we're speaking again, that this is what we're doing now that we weren't doing when we spoke 12 months ago?
Yeah, that's a good question. We are a little bit in like a transitional phase, let's say, in the team. I also spoke about it in the webinar yesterday, but I think the whole industry is, shifting in many ways.
Yeah.
And I think the role of a translator, linguist, language specialist, localization specialist is also shifting a little bit.
Yeah.
It's somehow, in many ways, still is sometimes a role of a translator, and that means like, oh, just toss this content over and I'll translate it. And I think these times need to sunset slowly, and they need to become more of a really like a linguistic expert, like more of you need to be a little bit of a marketing expert, a little bit of a product expert, but you need to you need to know the meaning behind your words and like how you work with these things. And this is something that we're working on at the moment. To give you a few examples, like we want to work with, for example, we want to work with the performance marketing team and have a project that is not like them, sending us content and saying, oh, we're going to launch this tomorrow, work on it. And, however well you work on it, again, you're just doing the localization basically. But really sitting down and saying, okay, let's test 2 versions of this. Here you go, do some research. What works? What works in your market, in your region. Let's set some targets around the whatever open rates, click rates. Like let's work in this together in a meaningful way. Or for a different type of content, we want to test how this button performs, in this market. So research some options, kind of build a hypothesis around this. Like, why did you choose this option? Why did you choose this option? So just kind of putting a little bit more thought and research behind these things and having time to do this, I think. And this is how we want to, work more. We work somewhat like this now, but we still do have a lot of things that we, kind of get, and we just need to, proofread a little bit, check, publish. Like it's a localization team after all. This is what we do. But I think we're excited to transition a little bit in this way, and also really kind of what I mentioned already, use this position of being a customer within the company to work with, with our UX research team, with our product teams, with our engineering teams, and help them build a better product for everybody that is in our position in the industry. I think this is like our most unique kind of power at the moment, and we really need to use it. Like I almost feel a little bit responsible for all the localization teams in the world who use DeepL. I want to make it good for them, and I want to make it good for us, and then by extension for them. So
And do you believe that there's an appetite for this change, or are the other teams even at all aware that you could facilitate well with contextualization of so many teams?
Absolutely. We've done a lot of efforts to reach out and to I often join brainstormings or like kind of scoping sessions or discovery sessions with product teams, and we've been on a little bit of a campaign also to talk to sales teams and like get them to understand like how teams work and what they need, like talk to product teams and get them to understand like what really works for us, right? So it's it's interesting. We also, we are also just one part of the customer base. Like there's also companies that don't have a localization team or have a completely different use case, right? You have legal companies who use it to translate the documents they're sending around just so they understand the documents. So, there's many use cases, but I think for our use case, we can definitely do a lot, and I'm excited for that. Yeah.
I'm just picturing the cost savings if teams did that. But that's my background. That's what I think.
Yeah, well, it's, I think when I hear you describing what the transformation should be for you, I think that, I know today you are Director of Localization at DeepL, but I wouldn't be surprised if at some point in time in the future, I would see you with another title that would be Director of Content Operations and not just localization, because localization would be part of that, but you would extend your scope or your work to content operations, which would be including UX, which would be including creation of content, etc., so that you are in charge or you are supervising the whole supply chain and not just, I say just very carefully, not just localization. I think, when I hear you, sometimes I have the feeling that, I could speak to someone who is already now Director of Content Operations and not just localization.
I'm just
very interesting.
We may not be able to send that out because the current Director of Content might not want to hear this.
Oh, if there is one, I don't know.
No, we don't have
okay.
What would you say, like a federated model, like we content teams, but they're sitting in different departments.
Okay.
No, that's what I understood. No, it's
I pictured this poor person sitting there going, "What?"
I knew that
she's gunning for my job.
I understood. I understood that. Obviously, it's not something that is there yet. But very few companies today have this federated model in place. I was lucky. I was working in those companies before, in multinationals, but it's easier when it's a big multinational because you have more budget, more sponsorship, etc. But I know that in mid-sized companies, startups or scale-ups, it's more difficult because, of course, you need to have not just the model, but also the willingness, the push from the C or the D level to actually put in place this model and to execute the plans that are related to content operations and not just translation localization. I've seen many people in my life, willing to become more involved in content management rather than just translation management. But it's difficult because these people were considered as the translation guys or the translation ladies, and they had to do that and nothing else. And these people were struggling to sell the model of translation localization being part of content operations, which is very difficult to. I was lucky to work for some companies having this vision, but I realized around me there were not so many people being able to work in an environment that was much more integrated, that was not split between UX, translation, localization. So it's I think it's difficult. I think for just to sell, not to implement, but to sell.
No, definitely. I've seen this as well, and I think I've chatted to many people about this. You do get like typecast in a way, right? Like you exactly. Do this. And I've had this happen a few times in interviews where, I even also got approached by the recruiter, and it was like a content manager, like a head of content role, and she was like, "Oh, you'd be great for this role." I mean, she did check my CV. I actually did these roles right before, so I was a good candidate. But then the hiring manager, I guess they looked at my CV. They only saw the latest role, and they're like, "Oh no, she's only doing this." I mean, it happens a lot, and I think this is actually one of the reasons why I was slightly hesitant to also leave my previous job, because I did have this, right? Like I was heading all the content teams. I was really enjoying it. Like this model was something that I thought was really valuable. So it's definitely a consideration to, kind of step out of it. But yeah, for sure.
I'm conscious of the time that we've already taken, and I've very much enjoyed chatting with you. Is there anything that we haven't asked you that you'd like to talk about any programs that you'd like to promote without overtly sticking up a banner across the top, but obviously talk about
Yeah, I don't know. Not really. I
questions.
think we touched on a lot of things. Is there anything else that that you normally discuss that we haven't touched or?
The thing that fascinates me about this is that we obviously have scripts and we also have stuff. And I know that Bruno kindly sent you stuff, but it varies so much from person to person. It is so interesting. It's what makes it so interesting for me, because every individual brings something different. So sometimes I'd start with the same question and within 10 seconds we've gone down a completely different road, because you can tell that's the person's interest or the person's strength. The person is more comfortable in that space. So it varies so much. I mean, we used to ask, and this is also what I find fascinating, I really do talk too much sometimes, is at the start of this, and we only started this less than a year ago, is it?
Yes. Yeah.
We were asking about, we used to joke about AI bingo. So we would say, okay, we have to bring this up. We don't even ask that anymore, and we're less than 12 months into this.
No, absolutely.
Isn't that, well, that I find that interesting.
No,
So,
no.
yeah.
No, it's and I knew before inviting you to this podcast that obviously you were one of these few people who had this, I'm going to use it again, content operational background, and because I think we interviewed already quite a number of people, and most of these people had this sort of straight line path, which was translation, localization, project management. So it was always in the sort of, translation and localization, route, the sort of, the straight line, more or less straight line. But, having someone like you who has had experience in UX, in content teams, that is really what, in my opinion, that's just my opinion, Paula, so don't get me wrong. In my opinion, the language industry should have many more people like you with your profile, because I think the language industry is sometimes a little bit too not narrow-minded, but too focused on what it does and not what other teams are doing. And I think it should be more open. That's probably my best description. And I think with people with your background, it's easier for the language industry to be open, because you can tell why translators or why localization teams should work with UX, why they should work with designers, why they should work today with data scientists. Otherwise, other teams are saying, oh, data scientist, this is not for me, these are the tech guys. Yeah. You have this sort of it's human, so I don't blame anyone for that. But it's more like, yes, I think the language industry needs to be more embedded in a bigger picture that is called content supply chain, that is called product management, even product management. Yeah. And instead of being sometimes too narrow and too out of the game because it's too focused. And it's great to be focused. There is a real expertise in the language industry, but that expertise, in my opinion, should be expanded to more fields, which are, product design, UX, etc. And with people like you, it would be so much easier, but there are not enough people like you. That's the problem.
I honestly would suggest that is not limited to the language industry.
Oh, wow.
It's also because Bruno and I were having, this won't be in the podcast, this part of it, but Bruno and I were having this conversation on the way in here, and we were talking about an entrepreneur-led business and a money manager-led business, regardless of what direction the money is coming from. And it's so different. It is so different. And neither of them is easy, I believe. So I've seen all sorts because of my previous profession. So the entrepreneur, but what I have learned is what you're speaking about happens again and again and again and again and again and again and again.
Definitely. I agree completely. And, I think also kind of to your point also, Bruno, like I think also because of my background, I've done some decisions and the team that would be totally frowned upon by the, localization standards. Like when I was building the team in Get Your Guide, I remember I joined and, the team was a lot of really, really proper linguists. And I was like, okay, we need some, a little bit of a different experience. So when I was interviewing for, the other roles that we were hiring, I got a person who had never worked as a linguist, never. They did all the tests, but, they were a journalist.
Yeah.
Or I hired a person who was a UX writer, actually. They never did actual localization. They were fantastic. They did brilliantly. They all got promoted. They're, leaders now in the space. And it was, you could say I made a risk, but I think you need to kind of do this sometimes. Otherwise, you end up with a very homogenous kind
That's
of
right.
very static situation. And it goes with the leadership and just with the whole team, like how you.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. It's interesting sometimes. Obviously, I don't recruit anymore unless it's very, very senior roles, and sometimes people want me to do something that's very, very confidential or whatever. But thankfully, I have a very, very great little team. But it's fascinating. I do still sit in on a number of most of the client discussions who are looking, will they work with us? Will they hire us? And I end up sometimes saying to the people, okay, have I got this correct? You want me to convince Paula, who's currently working for company number 1, doing 1, 2, 3, and 4. You want me to convince her to leave that company. She's been there for 5 years. I actually know Paula actually has a family commitment and, mortgages and all that stuff and children at school. And to go and work for you and do 1, 2, 3, and 4, and you're going to give her an extra $5,000. I need more. Tell me something else because it's safe. Because they know she did it there, she can do it for me. It's like, she can, but really, is she going to? Well, maybe she might hate her boss, but, every organisation has something different to offer. So if you're the employer of choice, what is the one thing that makes you the employer of choice for a group, let's say 10 potential individuals who might fit the role, and it ends up with one person. But so what is your point of choice? And people look at me as if to say, I don't know, we do this, and I know you do it, and they do it, and they do it, and 3,000 other organisations do it, but what is different about you? Your organisation, not you. Anyway, I'm telling people stuff they already know. So we better let you go unless there's anything else you'd like to...
No, not really. It was really wonderful to chat with you. It was very pleasant. I'm really
great.
thankful for the opportunity.